There is a moment every morning when your life is waiting to see which version of you is going to show up. It happens before the notifications, before the messages, before the noise, before the demands. Before the world starts telling you what you should think about, what you should worry about, what you should buy, what you should fear, what you should chase, and who you should become. There is a quiet space in the morning when nobody is asking anything from you. And most people never experience it because they are asleep. And I am not talking only about physical sleep. I am talking about something much deeper. There are people who wake up at 8 o'clock every morning and have been sleeping through their own lives for 10 years. There are people who open their eyes every morning, reach for their phone, check messages, scroll through other people's lives, consume other people's opinions, absorb other people's emotions. And before their feet even touch the floor, they have already surrendered control of their mind. And then they wonder why they feel behind. They wonder why they feel distracted. They wonder why they don't have enough time. They wonder why they cannot stay disciplined. They wonder why their dreams feel further away every year. But maybe the problem isn't that you don't have enough time. Maybe the problem is that you keep giving your best hours away. Think about that. Your life is being built in the hours you barely notice. The decisions you make when nobody is watching. The promises you keep when nobody is applauding. The mornings when you could have gotten up, but you didn't. The moments when you could have worked, but you chose comfort. The opportunities you could have prepared for, but you kept telling yourself, tomorrow. And tomorrow has become one of the most expensive words in human history. Tomorrow. I'll start tomorrow. I'll wake up tomorrow. I'll exercise tomorrow. I'll read tomorrow. I'll build the business tomorrow. I'll learn the skill tomorrow. I'll fix my finances tomorrow. I'll stop wasting time tomorrow. I'll become disciplined tomorrow. I'll take myself seriously tomorrow. But tomorrow has a strange habit. It keeps moving. And one day you look up and realize that tomorrow has quietly stolen years from you. So let me ask you something. What if the first battle of your day is not against the alarm clock? What if the first battle is against the version of you that has become comfortable with remaining exactly where you are? Because getting out of bed at 5 in the morning is not really about 5 in the morning. 5 is just a number. The deeper issue is whether you can make a decision before your excuses become louder than your ambition. Can you keep a promise to yourself when nobody knows whether you kept it? Can you choose your future over your feelings? Can you sit in silence long enough to hear what your life is actually asking from you? Because that is what the early morning can become, a meeting with yourself. And most people spend their entire lives avoiding that meeting. They keep the television on, they keep the phone in their hand, they keep themselves busy, they keep themselves entertained, they keep themselves surrounded by noise. Because silence has a way of asking uncomfortable questions. What are you doing with your life? What have you been postponing? Who are you becoming? What could you have accomplished by now? What do you know you need to change? And perhaps the most uncomfortable question of all, how much longer are you going to keep waiting for yourself? Maybe you have heard people say, wake up at 5. And perhaps you thought it was just another productivity trick, another internet trend, another person telling you to wake up early, drink water, exercise, journal, read a book, and somehow become a completely different human being before breakfast. But if that is all you hear, you are missing the deeper point. The point isn't to wake up at 5 so you can tell people you woke up at 5. The point is to build a life where your actions are no longer controlled by your moods. Because if your mood decides what you do, your future will always be unstable. When you feel motivated, you work. When you don't, you stop. When you're excited, you move. When you're tired, you negotiate. When things are easy, you stay committed. When things become difficult, You start looking for an escape. And slowly, without realizing it, you train yourself to obey feelings instead of principles. That is dangerous because feelings change. Circumstances change, weather changes, energy changes, people change, opportunities change, but your commitments have to mean something. Otherwise, every difficult day becomes an excuse to become a different person. Let me tell you about a man who learned this too late. He wasn't famous. He wasn't wealthy. He didn't have a dramatic life. He worked a normal job, had a family, paid bills, came home tired, watched television, checked his phone, went to bed late, and repeated the same routine. Every year, he told himself that this was the year he would change. He would get healthier. He would save money. He would learn something new. He would start the project he had been thinking about for years. He even bought notebooks. He downloaded applications. He watched motivational videos. He made plans. And for a few days, he was serious. Then life became inconvenient. He was tired. He had a difficult day at work. Someone upset him. He slept late, and the plan disappeared. Years passed. One evening, he found an old notebook. Inside, it was a goal he had written almost 7 years earlier. He stared at it. The goal wasn't impossible. That was what hurt. It wasn't some fantasy. He could have done it. He simply never stayed with it long enough. He sat there looking at his own handwriting and realized something painful. The person who had prevented him from becoming that version of himself wasn't his employer. It wasn't the economy. It wasn't his family. It wasn't bad luck. It was the thousands of tiny moments in which he had chosen what felt easier. One morning mattered little. One missed workout mattered little. One late night mattered little. One wasted hour mattered little. One excuse mattered little. But 7 years of little decisions had become a very large result. That is the power of accumulation. People often think transformation happens in dramatic moments. Sometimes it does. But most lives are changed quietly, one morning at a time, one decision at a time, one page at a time, one workout at a time, 1 hour of focused work at a time, one refusal to quit at a time, and the same law works in reverse. Your life can deteriorate quietly too. You don't suddenly become undisciplined. You practice undiscipline. You don't suddenly lose confidence. You repeatedly teach yourself that your own promises don't matter. You don't suddenly become distracted. You repeatedly train your brain to seek stimulation every time silence appears. You don't suddenly become weak. You repeatedly choose the easier option until difficult things begin to feel impossible. And that is why the morning matters. Not because 5 o'clock possesses magical power, but because the morning gives you a place to practice becoming the person you say you want to become. Imagine waking up while the streets are quiet. The room is dark. Your mind is still heavy. Your body wants another hour. Your bed feels comfortable. And nobody would know if you went back to sleep. Nobody would criticize you. Nobody would punish you. There is no audience. That is exactly why the moment matters. Because when nobody is watching, you discover who you are becoming. You hear the alarm. And there is a conversation inside you. Just 10 more minutes. You worked hard yesterday. You can start tomorrow. It's too early. It's cold. I'm tired. And then another voice appears. Quiet, not dramatic, not emotional, just certain. Get up. That voice is not motivation. That voice is character. And character is built when the louder voice says, I don't feel like it. And you act anyway. Now I want you to imagine something. Imagine that tomorrow morning you wake up at 5, not because you are trying to impress anyone, not because you want to post a picture of your alarm, not because you want to become part of some productivity club. You wake up because you have decided that the first hour of your day belongs to the person you are becoming. The world can have the rest. Your employer can have the workday. Your family can have their needs. Your phone can wait. The news can wait. Social media can wait. The arguments can wait. The problems can wait. For 1 hour, you belong to yourself. And that hour can change more than your schedule. It can change your relationship with yourself. Because every time you keep a promise to yourself, something happens internally. You begin to trust yourself. That may sound simple. It isn't. Self-trust is one of the most powerful forms of confidence. Confidence is not simply believing you are talented. Confidence is knowing you can depend on yourself. If you tell yourself you will do something and repeatedly don't do it, your mind notices. You may not consciously think, I don't trust myself. But somewhere beneath your conscious thoughts, your brain remembers. I've said this before. I've tried this before. I quit before. I didn't follow through. And that memory quietly weakens you. But the reverse is also true. Every time you say, I will, and then you cast a vote for a new identity, you tell yourself, I am someone who follows through. I am someone who can tolerate discomfort. I am someone who does difficult things. I am someone who doesn't need to feel ready. I am someone whose future matters more than temporary comfort. And those votes accumulate. That is why waking up early can become much bigger than waking up early. You are not simply changing your alarm. You are changing the evidence your mind has about who you are. But here's where people make a mistake. They try to transform their entire life overnight. They wake up at 5, they exercise for an hour, they meditate, they read 50 pages, they write 10 goals. They work for 3 hours. They eat perfectly. They promise themselves they will never waste time again. And for 3 days, they feel unstoppable. Then life happens. They sleep badly. They miss the alarm. They feel exhausted. And suddenly, the entire identity collapses. Why? Because they were trying to build a new life using excitement instead of structure. Real discipline is quieter. It doesn't need a dramatic beginning. It needs a repeatable one. Maybe your first morning is not spectacular. Maybe you wake up at 5 and sit there for 5 minutes, trying to understand why you made this decision. That's okay. Maybe you walk for 20 minutes. Maybe you read 10 pages. Maybe you write 1 page. Maybe you simply sit in silence and think. The objective is not to perform greatness. The objective is to establish a relationship with consistency. Because consistency is where transformation becomes inevitable. Think about a seed. You don't plant it on Monday and dig it up on Tuesday because you can't see a tree. You don't water it for 3 days and then complain that nothing happened. You understand that invisible work is still work. Your life works the same way. There will be mornings when you do the work and feel no immediate reward. There will be days when nobody notices. There will be weeks when the numbers barely change. There will be moments when you wonder whether all this discipline is worth it. Those moments matter because anybody can continue when the reward is immediate. The real test comes when the reward is delayed. And this is where many people lose. They want evidence before commitment. They want results before consistency. They want confidence before action. But life rarely works that way. Action often comes first, then evidence, then confidence, then identity, then results. You don't wait to feel like a disciplined person. You practice discipline until being disciplined feels normal. You don't wait to become confident. You do difficult things until your mind has evidence that you can handle difficulty. You don't wait for the perfect morning. You create enough imperfect mornings that eventually your life becomes different. Now let's go deeper. Why do people struggle so much with getting out of bed? Because the bed is not just a bed. It represents immediate comfort. And the human brain is incredibly good at choosing immediate comfort over distant rewards. Your future is invisible. Your pillow is not. Your dream is abstract. Your bed is warm. Your long-term financial freedom requires years. Another 20 minutes of sleep gives you pleasure immediately. This is the battle, not between 5 and 8. between immediate gratification and delayed fulfillment. And that battle appears everywhere, in your finances, in your health, in your relationships, in your career, in your education, in your business. In your character, the person who always chooses what feels good now eventually pays for it later. The person who is willing to experience discomfort now often receives freedom later. That doesn't mean you must suffer every minute of your life. It means you must become capable of choosing something important over something immediately pleasurable. That is maturity. A child asks, "What do I want right now?" An adult asks, "What will this decision create?" Those are very different questions. So tomorrow morning, when you hear the alarm, don't ask, "Do I feel like getting up?" That question gives your mood authority. Ask a different question. What kind of person am I practicing becoming right now? That question changes everything. Because now the alarm is no longer an interruption. It is a decision point. A small doorway. On one side is the old pattern. On the other is the new identity. And you choose again and again and again. Until eventually the decision becomes part of who you are. But there is another reason the early morning matters. Attention. Your attention is your life. Where your attention goes, your life goes. If the first thing you give your attention to every morning is other people's lives, you begin your day as a consumer. You consume news, you consume entertainment, you consume opinions, you consume outrage. You consume advertisements. You consume other people's achievements. And then you wonder why your own goals feel distant. Imagine starting your day differently. Instead of asking, "What's happening in the world?" you ask, "What am I building?" Instead of checking who posted something, you check what you need to create. Instead of consuming someone else's dream, you work on your own. That is a different psychological position. You move from reaction to creation. And there is enormous power in that because most people spend their days reacting. The phone rings. They react. An email arrives. They react. Someone criticizes them. They react. The market changes. They react. Their mood changes. They react. Someone succeeds. They compare. Someone fails. They judge. Something goes wrong. They complain. They rarely stop long enough to decide what deserves their attention. The early morning gives you that opportunity. Before the world enters your mind, enter your own mind. Ask yourself, what matters today? What must not be neglected? What am I avoiding? What would make today meaningful? What is one thing I can improve? What deserves my best energy? Those questions are powerful because they force intentionality. And intentionality is the opposite of drifting. A drifting life can look busy. That is what makes it dangerous. You can be exhausted and still be moving nowhere. You can have a full calendar and an empty sense of progress. You can answer hundreds of messages and accomplish nothing important. You can spend 12 hours working and never touch the one task that could change your future. Busyness is not progress. Motion is not direction. And waking up early doesn't automatically make you productive either. You can wake up at 5 and waste 5 hours. The hour itself isn't the solution. What you do with the hour matters. So don't worship the clock. Use the clock. Give your morning a purpose. Maybe it is learning. Maybe it is writing. Maybe it is exercise. Maybe it is planning. Maybe it is prayer or reflection. Maybe it is building a business. Maybe it is studying a skill. Maybe it is simply creating silence so you can think. The exact activity matters less than the principle. You are choosing what enters your mind before the world chooses for you. And that is a powerful form of freedom. Let me tell you about another person. She was in her late 20s and had spent years telling herself she wasn't disciplined. Every new goal ended the same way. She would begin with enthusiasm. Then she would miss one day. Then 2. Then she would feel guilty. Then she would avoid the goal because the guilt made her uncomfortable. Eventually, she would create a new plan, The cycle repeated. One day, someone asked her a strange question. "Why do you keep calling yourself undisciplined?" She said. "Because I never stick to anything." The person replied, "Maybe you don't need more discipline. Maybe you need to stop turning one mistake into an identity." That sentence changed something, because she had been making a small mistake and then attaching a huge meaning to it. She missed Monday. Her mind said, "See, you're lazy." She missed Tuesday. "You're hopeless." She ate badly. "I'm never going to change." She slept late. "I have no discipline." One behavior became a judgment. The judgment became an identity. The identity became a behavior. And the behavior reinforced the identity, a loop. So she changed the rule. Missing once was no longer failure. Staying away was failure. That distinction transformed her relationship with consistency. She didn't need perfection. She needed recovery. And that is something I want you to understand. The disciplined person is not the person who never falls. The disciplined person becomes very good at returning. They miss the workout and return. They sleep late and return. They waste an evening and return. They have a bad week and return. They fail and return. They get rejected and return. They lose money and return. They lose confidence and return. The power is in the return. Because life will interrupt your plans. You will get tired. You will get sick. You will face emergencies. People will disappoint you. Things will go wrong. Your schedule will break. Your motivation will disappear. The question isn't whether your routine will ever be disrupted. It will. The question is how quickly you come back. And there is a deeper lesson here. Don't build your identity around being perfect. Build it around being someone who returns, because that identity can survive reality. Now think about your future. Not next week. Not next month. 1 year. Imagine waking up 1 year from now. Your alarm rings. What has changed? Maybe your body is stronger. Maybe your mind is calmer. Maybe you have read 20 books. Maybe you've learned a skill. Maybe you've saved money. Maybe you've built something. Maybe you've become more confident. Maybe you've stopped depending on motivation. Maybe you trust yourself. Now imagine the other version. You wake up 1 year from now exactly as you are today. Same excuses, same distractions, same unfinished plans, same late nights, same scrolling, same promises, same "I'll start soon." Nothing dramatic happened. And that's the frightening part. Nothing dramatic had to happen. You simply repeat it today. Then imagine 3 years, then 5. What happens if the smallest patterns remain unchanged? The future doesn't usually punish you immediately. It lets you continue. It lets you choose. It lets you postpone. It lets you waste. And then one day the bill arrives. The bill is called regret. Regret is painful because it contains knowledge. You don't regret the things you never wanted. You regret the things you wanted and knew you could have pursued. You regret the book you could have written, the business you could have built, the body you could have developed, the relationship you could have repaired, the skill you could have learned, the person you could have become. And the most painful sentence isn't always, "I failed." Sometimes it is, "I never really tried." That sentence has weight because failure can teach you, but avoidance leaves you wondering, what if? What if I had started? What if I had stayed? What if I had worked another year? What if I had taken myself seriously? What if I had stopped making excuses? What if I had believed that small progress mattered? You cannot answer those questions after the years are gone. But you can answer them now, not with words, with behavior. That is why tomorrow morning matters. Not because 5 o'clock will magically make you successful. Because tomorrow morning is one more opportunity to cast a vote for the person you want to become, and then the next morning, and the next, until your life begins to reflect your decisions. There will come a point when waking up early is no longer the hard part. The hard part will be deciding what deserves your energy. And that's where the deeper work begins. Because discipline without direction can become another form of busyness. You can become extremely good at doing things that don't matter. So you need clarity. What are you trying to build? What kind of life do you want? What skills does that life require? What habits support it? What distractions are incompatible with it? Who must you become? Those are not casual questions. They are life questions. And if you never answer them, other people will answer them for you. Your culture will tell you what success means. Advertising will tell you what happiness means. Social media will tell you what beauty means. Your peers will tell you what normal means. Fear will tell you what is possible. And convenience will tell you what effort is worth. You need a stronger voice. Your own. That is why solitude matters. Sometimes you need to wake up before everyone else because you need to hear yourself think. Not forever not because other people are bad, but because constant noise makes self-awareness difficult. When you sit alone in the early morning, you can no longer blame the noise. You have to face the truth. Maybe you're not confused. Maybe you're avoiding a decision. Maybe you're not lacking time. Maybe you're spending it carelessly. Maybe you're not lacking opportunity. Maybe you're lacking preparation. Maybe you're not lacking confidence. Maybe you're lacking evidence that you can trust yourself. Maybe you don't need another motivational video. Maybe you need to keep one promise and then another and another. There is something strangely powerful about doing the work before you feel inspired. It teaches your brain that action doesn't require permission from emotion. You become less fragile. You become harder to derail. You stop asking whether you feel motivated. You start asking what needs to be done. That shift changes careers. It changes businesses. It changes bodies. It changes relationships. It changes lives because successful people are not people who feel good every morning. They are people who have learned to act according to values rather than moods. And don't misunderstand that. They still have fear. They still have bad days. They still procrastinate sometimes. They still doubt themselves. They still get tired. The difference is that those experiences don't automatically control their behavior. Fear can be present and they can move. Doubt can be present and they can work. Fatigue can be present and they can make a responsible decision. Disappointment can be present and they can continue. That is strength, not the absence of discomfort. The ability to move while discomfort is present. Now, I want you to think about something most people never consider. What if your morning routine is actually training you for every other difficult decision you will make? When you learn to get out of bed despite discomfort, you are practicing. When you choose the workout instead of the excuse, you are practicing. When you close the phone and return to your work, you are practicing. When you save instead of spend, you are practicing. When you tell the truth, even when it is uncomfortable, you are practicing. When you continue learning after failing, you are practicing. The morning is not isolated. It is rehearsal. You are rehearsing the kind of person you will be when life becomes difficult, and life will become difficult. There is no version of the future where everything goes according to plan. At some point, you will lose something. At some point, you will be rejected. At some point, someone will underestimate you. At some point, something you worked for will fail. At some point, you will have to begin again. And when that day arrives, your character will be more important than your circumstances. Character is not built during the crisis. The crisis reveals what you built beforehand. That is why ordinary mornings matter. They seem insignificant, but they are quietly constructing the person who will face extraordinary moments. Imagine two people experiencing the same setback. One has spent years practicing avoidance. The other has spent years practicing responsibility. The setback is the same. The internal response is not. One says, "Why is this happening to me?" The other says, "What can I do now?" One collapses, the other adapts. One searches for someone to blame, the other searches for something to learn. One sees the end, the other sees another decision. That difference wasn't created on the day of the crisis. It was created in thousands of ordinary moments. Perhaps one of those moments was an early morning when nobody was watching. Now, there is another uncomfortable truth. If you want an extraordinary life, you will have to become comfortable with being temporarily misunderstood. People may not understand why you go to bed early. They may laugh because you're waking up before sunrise. They may say you're taking things too seriously. They may invite you out when you have decided to work. They may tell you to relax. Sometimes they will mean well, but not everyone has to understand the season you are in. You don't need permission to take your future seriously. You don't need applause to become disciplined. You don't need everybody to agree with your priorities, because if you constantly adjust your goals to match other people's comfort, eventually you will live a life designed by committee. And you are the one who has to live it. There is a difference between arrogance and conviction. Arrogance says, I don't need anyone. Conviction says, I know what I must do, and I am willing to do it. You can love people and still have boundaries. You can be generous and still protect your time. You can care about others and still refuse to abandon your goals. You can be humble and still demand more from yourself. That balance matters. And perhaps waking up early is one small way of establishing that boundary. This hour is mine. This time is intentional. This is where I think. This is where I prepare. This is where I build. This is where I become. Now, let's talk about money, because discipline doesn't stay inside the bedroom. A person who cannot control small impulses often struggles with large financial goals. You see something, you want it, you buy it, you feel good. Then later you wonder where the money went. The same psychological pattern appears: immediate reward, delayed cost. The disciplined person learns to reverse the equation: contemporary sacrifice, long-term freedom, save instead of spend. Learn instead of consume, build instead of impress, invest instead of constantly upgrade. And this doesn't mean never enjoying life. It means not sacrificing your future to constantly satisfy your present. That is a principle bigger than money. It is a principle of freedom. Every time you delay gratification for something meaningful, you strengthen your ability to direct your own life. And every time you surrender to an impulse, you teach yourself that desire is authority. Ask yourself which person you are training, because you are always training something. Every choice is practice. Every repeated choice becomes easier. If you practice distraction becomes easy. If you practice focus becomes easier. If you practice complaining becomes automatic. If you practice gratitude becomes easier. If you practice quitting becomes familiar. If you practice returning becomes familiar. You become what you repeatedly rehearse. That is why your environment matters. If your phone is beside your pillow, temptation is within reach. If you stay awake surrounded by endless stimulation, sleep becomes harder. If your workspace is chaotic, distraction becomes easier. If the people around you constantly mock ambition, discipline becomes harder. You cannot always control your environment, but you can influence it, make the right choice easier. Put the phone away, prepare your clothes, set the alarm, decide the night before what the morning is for Ramam and necessary decisions, because discipline is not always about fighting temptation. Sometimes it is about designing your environment, so temptation doesn't have to be fought every 5 minutes. That is wisdom. And there is another layer. You have to protect your evening if you want to own your morning. You cannot stay up until 2 a.m. consuming meaningless content and expect 5 o'clock to feel heroic. Waking early begins the night before. The person who wants a powerful morning must learn to respect sleep. This is not about punishing your body. It is about aligning your life. You don't need to prove toughness by destroying your health. The goal is not to sleep less. The goal is to stop wasting the hours that belong to your rest and then stealing from tomorrow to pay for them. Your morning starts with the decisions you make the previous evening. That is another lesson people overlook. The future is often decided before the moment arrives. Preparation reduces negotiation. If you decide at night what tomorrow morning will look like, you don't have to debate it while half asleep. And this applies everywhere. Prepare your work, prepare your meals, prepare your schedule, prepare your priorities, prepare your environment. The more important the goal, the less you should depend on improvisation. But don't become obsessed with perfect routines. Life is not a machine. You are human. Some mornings will be messy. Some mornings you will be tired. Some mornings you will wake up late. The goal is not control over everything. The goal is control over your response. That distinction can save you years of frustration. Now imagine yourself 5 years from now, not the fantasy version, the real version. You have 5 years of choices behind you. What evidence would you like to have? Would you like to have evidence that you became stronger, that you kept promises, that you developed a skill, that you built something, that you became financially wiser, that you became healthier, that you became calmer, that you became more courageous, that you became someone your younger self would recognize with respect? You don't create that person in 5 years. You create that person tomorrow morning. And then you create them again the morning after. This is why the ordinary matters. You are looking for a dramatic transformation. Life is asking for a repeated decision. You want a breakthrough. Life often gives you a routine. You want confidence. Life gives you uncomfortable practice. You want success. Life gives you boring consistency. You want freedom. Life asks you to become responsible. You want a different life. Life asks you to become a different person. And becoming different can feel lonely because the old identity doesn't disappear politely. It argues, it negotiates, it reminds you of who you used to be. You've always been like this, huh? You'll probably quit. People like you don't do that. Why bother? You're too late. You're not talented enough. Someone else is already doing it. Just enjoy yourself. The old identity wants familiarity. Even painful familiarity can feel safer than unfamiliar possibility. That's why change is psychologically difficult. You aren't just changing behavior, you're challenging an identity. And identity resists contradiction. If you've always believed you're lazy, disciplined action creates discomfort. If you've always believed you're weak, courage creates discomfort. If you've always believed you're incapable, success can feel strangely unfamiliar. So don't be surprised when growth feels uncomfortable. You are not necessarily doing it wrong. You may simply be becoming someone your old mind doesn't recognize yet. Stay with the process, not because every day will feel powerful, but because repetition eventually creates familiarity with the new identity. One day you won't be the person trying to wake up early. You'll be the person who wakes early. One day you won't be trying to exercise. You'll be someone who trains. One day you won't be trying to focus. You'll be someone who protects attention. One day you won't be trying to save money. You'll be financially responsible. One day you won't be trying to become confident. You'll have evidence. And evidence is powerful. You don't have to convince yourself with affirmations when your life is already giving you proof. I said I would do it, and I did. I was afraid, and I moved. I failed, and I returned. I was tired, and I still made a wise choice. I wanted comfort, but I chose my future. Those memories become internal strength, and nobody can give that to you. You have to earn it. Now I want you to think about the person you could become if you stop negotiating with every uncomfortable moment. What would happen if you stopped asking, how do I feel? and started asking, what does the person I want to become do next? That question is extraordinary because the future version of you has different standards. The future version doesn't need to feel like working. They work. The future version doesn't wait for perfect confidence. They act. The future version doesn't spend every free minute scrolling. They protect attention. The future version doesn't panic over every setback. They recover. The future version doesn't need everybody's approval. They know what matters. And perhaps you think you have to become that person first before you can act like them. It works in reverse. Act like them, then become them. Identity follows repeated behavior. So tomorrow morning, when your alarm sounds, you're not trying to prove that you are extraordinary. You are simply practicing. Practicing getting up, practicing choosing, practicing keeping your word, practicing attention, practicing discomfort, practicing responsibility, practicing becoming. And that practice will eventually spill into the rest of your life. But don't stop at 5. The deeper goal is not an early morning, it is an intentional life. You could wake at 5 and still be spiritually, emotionally, and mentally asleep. You could wake before sunrise and spend the entire day chasing meaningless things. You could be physically awake and psychologically unconscious. So wake up beyond the clock. Wake up to your habits. Wake up to your choices. Wake up to the cost of distraction. Wake up to the value of time. Wake up to your responsibility. Wake up to the fact that nobody is coming to live your life for you. People may help. People may encourage you. People may love you. People may open doors. But nobody can take your decisions for you. Nobody can discipline your mind for you. Nobody can use your hours for you. Nobody can build your character for you. At some point, responsibility becomes freedom. Because when you stop waiting for someone else to rescue your future, you discover how much power you actually have. Not unlimited power, not magical power, but real power. The power to choose your next action. And sometimes the next action is small. Get out of bed, drink water, walk, ride, work, sev, apologize, study, try again, turn the phone off, say no, say yes, make the call, drop the page. Start the application. Take the first step. Small actions are not insignificant when they are repeated. A single brick looks meaningless. But a person who places one brick correctly every day is building something. The problem is that we want to see the building before we are willing to lay bricks. We want proof. We want applause. We want immediate transformation. But the most important work often happens while nothing appears to be changing. That is where faith in your process becomes important. You keep working even when the scoreboard hasn't moved. You keep learning even when nobody notices. You keep training even when the mirror hasn't changed. You keep saving even when the account still looks small. You keep building even when the audience is tiny because you understand something now. Results are often delayed evidence of earlier decisions. The harvest comes later. The work comes first. And there is dignity in that. There is dignity in doing what needs to be done before anyone celebrates. There is dignity in being the person who works quietly. There is dignity in becoming strong without announcing it. There is dignity in letting your results introduce you. And maybe that is what the early morning represents. Not superiority. Not waking before other people so you can feel better than them. No, the world doesn't owe you applause because you woke at 5. You are not competing with people who sleep until 8. You are competing with the version of yourself that keeps postponing. That is the real competition. Yesterday's habits, yesterday's excuses, yesterday's fears, yesterday's identity. And you don't defeat that version in one dramatic battle. You outgrow it one morning, one choice, one promise, one return, one uncomfortable action, then another and another. Until the old version begins to feel distant. Now think about regret again. not as something to fear, but as a mirror. Imagine reaching an age where you have fewer years ahead than behind. Imagine looking back at your mornings. What would you wish you had done with them? Would you wish you had spent more time scrolling? Would you wish you had checked more notifications? Would you wish you had watched more arguments between strangers? Would you wish you had worried more about what people thought? Or would you wish you had built? Would you wish you had learned? Would you wish you had taken care of your body? Would you wish you had developed your mind? Would you wish you had pursued the idea that kept returning to you? Would you wish you had spent more time with the people you loved? Would you wish you had been braver? The answer may be uncomfortable, but discomfort is useful when it wakes you up. And perhaps that is the real message. Wake up, not just at 5. Wake up to the life you are living. Wake up to the fact that your habits are writing your future. Wake up to the fact that time is moving, whether you are ready or not. Wake up to the fact that comfort has a cost. Wake up to the fact that discipline is not punishment. Discipline is self-respect expressed through action. When you exercise because you said you would, you are respecting yourself. When you study because your future requires it, you are respecting yourself. When you sleep on time because tomorrow matters, you are respecting yourself. When you stop wasting hours because your life matters, you are respecting yourself. When you refuse to betray your goals for temporary pleasure, you are respecting yourself, and self-respect changes behavior. People often try to motivate themselves by insulting themselves. I'm lazy. I'm weak. I'm behind. I'm pathetic. That may create temporary emotion, but it doesn't build a healthy foundation. You don't need to hate yourself into becoming better. You need to respect yourself enough to demand better from yourself. There is a difference. Hatred says, you're not enough. Respect says, you are capable of more, so I won't allow you to keep abandoning yourself. That is a stronger voice, and it can be compassionate without being soft. You can forgive your past without allowing your past to dictate your future. You can understand why you developed certain habits without using that understanding as an excuse to keep them. Maybe you grew up without discipline. Maybe nobody taught you how to manage time. Maybe you had failures that damaged your confidence. Maybe people told you that your dreams were unrealistic. Maybe you've wasted years. Maybe you made terrible decisions. Maybe you've been inconsistent. Fine. Understand it. Learn from it. But don't turn explanation into destiny. Your history can explain you. It does not have to imprison you. There is still a decision in front of you. And perhaps that decision arrives tomorrow morning, the alarm rings, the room is quiet, nobody knows what you will do. That is the beauty of it. Nobody has to know. You don't need to announce a transformation. You don't need to tell everyone your new plan. You can simply begin. Quickly. The first morning may feel insignificant. Let it. The second may feel difficult. Let it. The 10th may still be imperfect. Let it. The point is not to manufacture a perfect streak. The point is to build a person who can continue. And eventually, something strange happens. You begin to look forward to the quiet. The world hasn't changed, but you have. You begin to understand that those early minutes are not empty. They are yours. You begin to think more clearly. You begin to notice patterns. You begin to see where your time is going. You begin to understand which goals actually matter. You begin to recognize which distractions are stealing from you. And perhaps one morning, sitting there in the quiet, you realize something you couldn't see before. You weren't lacking time. You were lacking ownership of your time. You weren't lacking potential. You were lacking consistent evidence. You weren't lacking opportunity. You were lacking preparation. You weren't necessarily waiting for motivation. You were waiting for permission. And nobody was coming to give it. So you gave it to yourself. That realization can change a person. Because once you understand that you are responsible for your next move, excuses become less comfortable. Not because life becomes easy, but because you see your agency more clearly. You realize that even when you cannot control the outcome, you can often control the preparation. You can control whether you learn, whether you practice, whether you show up, whether you recover, whether you tell the truth, whether you protect your attention, whether you keep going. That is enough power to begin. And beginning is important, but staying is where lives change. Anyone can begin. The world is full of beginnings, New Year's resolutions, new notebooks, new plans, new gym memberships, new businesses, new diets, new goals, new promises. But the person who can stay after the excitement disappears is rare, because eventually the novelty dies, the alarm is no longer inspiring, the book is no longer exciting, the workout is no longer new, the business becomes difficult, the numbers disappoint you, the results last longer. And now you're face to face with the real question. Do you still believe the goal matters when it stops entertaining you? That is where discipline becomes real. When the emotional reward disappears and the commitment remains. That is why the early morning can be such a powerful teacher. Every morning asks a quiet question. What matters more? Comfort now, or the person you could become? The answer will not always be the same. You are human. There will be mornings when rest is necessary. There will be mornings when your body needs recovery. There will be seasons when your schedule changes. The goal is not blind rigidity. The goal is conscious choice. There is a difference between rest and avoidance. There is a difference between recovery and laziness. There is a difference between patience and procrastination. There is a difference between preparation and fear. Wisdom is learning the difference, and that requires self-awareness. That is another reason to create quiet time. You need enough silence to tell the truth to yourself, because excuses become difficult to recognize when you're constantly distracted. Silence exposes them. And sometimes that is uncomfortable. You may discover that the goal you keep talking about is not actually a priority. You may discover that you spend hours on things you claim not to care about. You may discover that you are comparing your beginning to someone else's 10th year. You may discover that fear has been disguised as perfectionism. You may discover that you keep researching because research feels safer than action. You may discover that you don't need another strategy. You need courage. Those discoveries can hurt, but they can also liberate you, because you cannot change what you refuse to see. And once you see it, you have a choice. That choice is where transformation begins. Not in inspiration, in honesty. So perhaps tomorrow morning, don't immediately ask yourself what you want to accomplish. Ask yourself what you have been avoiding. What conversation? What responsibility? What decision? What project? What habit? What truth? What fear? Sometimes the thing you need most is not another goal. It is the courage to face the thing you've been running from. And the early morning can become the place where you stop running. You sit, you think, you breathe, you write, you face it, and then you decide. That is powerful, because a life changes when avoidance ends. Now imagine carrying that discipline beyond yourself. Imagine what happens to your relationships when you become more reliable. People know you will show up. Imagine what happens to your work when you can focus. Imagine what happens to your finances when you can delay gratification. Imagine what happens to your health when you stop negotiating with every impulse. Imagine what happens to your confidence when you repeatedly keep promises. One habit touches another. That is the compound effect. A stronger morning can produce a stronger day. A stronger day can produce a stronger week. A stronger week can produce a stronger month. A stronger month can produce a stronger year. And a stronger year can change the direction of a life. But the reverse compounds too. One wasted morning doesn't destroy your future. One isn't the problem. The problem is when one becomes normal, one excuse becomes a pattern becomes a habit becomes an identity becomes a destiny you never consciously chose. That is why you must pay attention to what you repeat, not what you intend, what you repeat. Your intentions are private wishes, your habits are public evidence, and your future will respond more to the evidence. So look at your mornings, not with shame, with curiosity. What are they teaching you? Are they teaching you that your goals matter? Or that comfort comes first? Are they teaching you focus or distraction? Are they teaching you self-trust or broken promises? Are they teaching you patience or instant gratification? Your morning is giving you feedback. Listen, and if you don't like what you see, don't become overwhelmed by the size of the change. Chant the next decision. You don't need to fix 5 years tonight. You need to win the next morning, then another, and another. And one day, you may look back and realize that the life you wanted wasn't created by one heroic moment. It was created by hundreds of mornings nobody saw, hundreds of decisions that felt ordinary, hundreds of times you chose the difficult thing, hundreds of times you returned after failure, hundreds of times you protected your attention, hundreds of times you told yourself, this matters, and kept going. That is how a person becomes formidable, not loud, not flashy, not perfect, formidable, reliable, grounded, difficult to distract, difficult to manipulate, difficult to stop, because they know who they are practicing becoming. And perhaps that is the person you are building, but don't rush it. Don't demand that tomorrow morning make you a completely different human being. Give yourself permission to become. There is power in becoming. A mountain isn't climbed in one step. A book isn't written in one sentence. A skill isn't mastered in one session. A fortune isn't built in one day. A character isn't formed in one decision. But every step matters. Every sentence matters. Every session matters. Every dollar matters. Every decision matters. Not because each one changes everything immediately, because each one contributes to what everything eventually becomes. That is the quiet mathematics of life. Small things repeated become big things. Small disciplines become strength. Small savings become capital. Small lessons become wisdom. Small acts of courage become confidence. Small acts of responsibility become character. Small mornings become a different life. And one day, perhaps you will wake before sunrise and realize you no longer recognize the person who once needed 10 alarms. Not because you became superhuman, because you stopped negotiating with yourself. You stopped waiting to feel ready. You stopped requiring applause. You stopped believing that progress had to be dramatic. You learned to respect small beginnings. You learned to return. You learned that discomfort doesn't mean danger. You learned that boredom doesn't mean failure. You learned that delayed results don't mean wasted effort. You learned that your future deserves your attention. And then the morning becomes something else. It becomes sacred. Not because the hour itself is magical, but because of what you decide to do with it. The world is still sleeping. The streets are quiet. The sky is beginning to change. And somewhere in that silence, you are working on a life that does not exist yet. Nobody can see it. There may be no applause, no evidence, no immediate reward. But you know that you're becoming, and perhaps that is enough, because there is a version of you 5 years from now who will know exactly what you did with these mornings. That version will live inside the consequences of today's choices. They will inherit your habits. They will inherit your discipline or your excuses. They will inherit your health, your skills, your savings, your relationships, your confidence, your character, your unfinished work, your completed work. Everything you are doing now is being handed forward. Think about that. You are not only living today. You are preparing a life for someone who hasn't arrived yet, your future self. And that person cannot come back and change your morning. They cannot reach through time and say, please take this seriously. They cannot give you another hour. They cannot return the year you wasted. But they are waiting inside the consequences. And perhaps tomorrow, when the alarm rings and the room is dark, you will feel that old temptation. Stay in bed just a little longer. Nobody will know. And maybe you'll hear another thought, not loud, not dramatic, just a quiet recognition. This moment is bigger than it looks, because it is. Not because getting up at 5 guarantees success. It doesn't. But because the decision represents something, a willingness to choose. A willingness to begin before you feel ready. A willingness to protect your future from your present impulses. A willingness to become responsible for what happens next. And once you understand that, the morning stops being about waking up early. It becomes about waking up fully, waking up to your potential, waking up to your responsibility, waking up to the passing of time, waking up to the life that is still possible. And maybe your life is not where you wanted it to be. Maybe you're behind. Maybe you've made mistakes. Maybe you've wasted years. Maybe you're financially struggling. Maybe your confidence is low. Maybe you're carrying rejection. Maybe you're starting again. Maybe nobody believes in what you're trying to build. Maybe you don't even fully believe in yourself yet, but you don't need complete belief to take the next step. You need enough courage to act before certainty arrives, and courage grows through use. Use it. One decision, one morning, one promise, one uncomfortable action, then another. And somewhere along the way, you may discover that the person you were waiting to become was not waiting somewhere in the future. That person was being constructed by what you did when nobody was watching, in the dark, in the silence, when the alarm rang, when the bed was warm, when the world was asleep, when there was no applause, when there was no guarantee, when all you had was a choice. And perhaps tomorrow morning, that choice will be waiting again. 5 o'clock. The room is quiet. The world has not started asking anything from you yet. Your phone is silent. Your excuses are awake. Your dreams are awake. Your old identity is awake. Your future is waiting. And for a few seconds, there is no noise between you and the decision. No audience, no explanation, no speech, just you. And that small, almost invisible moment in which you decide what gets the first word in your day, because whatever you choose there has a way of following you into everything that comes after.